I saw the arrogance in the eyes of those settlers, 21 and 22-year-olds with guns, laughing that they had detained us, having no respect for the fact that they were detaining Americans.
We do not care.
Well, this is going to be a really stupid video, but today we have to bring you the chronicle of one Democrat Congressman Ro Khanna. This guy's not very smart. They're calling him the theater kid of the year. But I kid you not today, this guy tried to take a trip to Palestine and then is now fuming over the fact that he got detained at gunpoint. At least allegedly, that's what he's saying. Now, first of all, I do have to ask, what the heck did he think was going to happen? But secondly, it does appear as if he's greatly exaggerating what actually went down here. By my understanding, it's because he tried to cross the border into the West Bank without any authorization, then is like, why did they question me? Can you believe the fascist apartheid state would say, hey, don't cross the border into one of the most sensitive geopolitically areas on Earth without expecting us to at least ask what the heck you're doing, right? But still, nonetheless, he's using this as his big excuse to go on the anti-Israel thing. Clearly, this is why Israel is so bad, because of the way they treated me and Greta Thunberg, to which I say, look, I understand fully that American-Israeli relations are not the best right now. Trump and Netanyahu are not getting along too well. I've never been this hardcore, everything Israel does is correct kind of character or whatever. But I do have to say that if Israel wants to gain some goodwill among the American right wing, I think they actually deserve it for the way they've treated Ro Khanna, Greta Thunberg. And I have to say what you will in other regards about stuff Israel does, but one thing you do have to respect about this country is the way in which they have very little tolerance for subversive foreigners who are coming into their country to attack them and cause a bunch of problems. I wish America could say the same. You see, because when someone immigrates to America and just constantly tries to criticize it and call it a fascist apartheid state, we elect them to be the mayor of New York City. We exalt them to political office. Hey, want to run for Congress? When those people go to Israel, we could learn something from this. They basically say, you're under arrest. Get the heck out of our country. So I would briefly like to say, everyone clap it up for Israel. Okay. Good job here. And frankly, if you want to fix the relationship, let's make a deal. Keep Ro Khanna. We'll keep the aid. We'll double the aid if you agree to keep Ro Khanna and Greta Thunberg. I mean, how ridiculous. But still, nonetheless, I want to discuss this failed, ridiculous stunt today. And it's like the most Palestinian thing to ever happen. Let's talk about it. First, though, do us a favor. If you enjoy our content, make sure you hit that like button down below. Subscribe to the channel if you are new. That is the best way to support our work. And it also ensures that you can stay up to date with all of the latest news and coverage. And with that said, so you can see that this is the headline that was apparently circulating. U.S. Congressman Ro Khanna was detained by armed Israeli settlers carrying American-made rifles for over an hour while visiting the West Bank. And they're supposed to be sharing this around saying, can you believe people would do this? He's an American. He's at gunpoint. This is really bad. Here's what apparently one of his campaign managers, Cameron Kasky, had to say. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, this was one of the original March for Our Lives kids, now working for the Khanna team. But he says, Ro and I visited the destroyed village of Zanuta and the site of this EU-funded school that got burned down by settlers. This is all in the West Bank, right? It was here that we got intercepted and captured by settlers wielding American-made rifles. Now, the IDF, right, the Israeli military, apparently then showed up, and they ended up taking the side of the settlers, not the U.S. congressman, basically telling the Americans here, whatever, you're not supposed to be here. They were questioning them, et cetera, et cetera. And apparently this lasted for all about an hour. But yeah, overall, long story short, it does not exactly appear as if their little third world foreign excursion to go advocate for sand war causes and plights that have nothing to do with the American people did not ultimately end all that well. Although there's a couple points that need to be made here. First and foremost, I don't know if these people ever realize how stupid that they look doing some of the stuff that they do, right? Which is kind of a recurring theme with the Palestine protests, because we were told, and isn't your whole thing that there's a genocide going on here, right? So this is not Gaza, this is the West Bank. But what do we so often hear about the West Bank? Oh, those Israeli settlers are just murdering innocent people. And same with the IDF, right? That's a genocidal military committing war crimes. You just had an encounter with both. It was not remotely violent. They let you go after an hour. Now, you can spin it into however you want. Oh, they had guns, therefore it means we were detained at gunpoint. It appears by all accounts that it happened nothing along those lines, but, you know, just something rather funny I found about that. And secondly, again, what appears to have happened here is the reason they were stopped is because, as you probably know about the West Bank, right, about the border between Israel territory and Palestine divided territory, it's a huge security situation. It's very sensitive. They probably saw these two random fools poking around the area, crossing the border without authorization, and basically probably went and stopped them and said, who the heck are these people, right? And trying to go and figure that out. By my understanding, you know, I've never been to Israel, but a lot of people are saying that this is a rather normal thing that happens on the border of the West Bank, to which I say, I don't think anything is absurd about, right? It's, again, a very sensitive border, a very dangerous border, maybe not as dangerous as Gaza, but still very dangerous. What do we expect to be happening here, right? What did they think was going to happen? But I think that actually answers it. See, that's the thing. Ro Khanna, this absolute fool, thinks that we're the idiots here, right? Because he probably knew this was going to happen. He knew, oh, if I walk over the border into Palestine and just snoop around and make this whole scene, that the IDF is probably going to show up and ask me who the heck I am, in the same sense that, remember when Greta Thunberg showed up on her stupid sailboat and tried to go into Gaza and then got detained because, hey, you're trying to enter a active war zone, you idiot. Of course, the military is going to tell you you're not allowed to be there. But it's basically what goes on here is they're trying to stage some type of propaganda moment. But in the end, if you have like an IQ above 80, you realize how foolish they look because they kind of baited this whole thing to happen. And in the end, what happened to them? Absolutely nothing. Very likely, if we were to guess honestly, the IDF probably didn't want an international incident and is like, hey, American congressmen, American citizens, this place is dangerous. There's sometimes clashes at the border. Like, get the heck out of here, right? They're probably trying to protect this guy if we're being completely honest. But anyways, here's the way Ro Khanna is trying to spin it. Take a listen.
I saw the arrogance in the eyes of those settlers, 21 and 22-year-olds with guns, laughing that they had detained us. The arrogance of those young IDF soldiers that my tax dollars are funding, having no respect for the fact that they were detaining Americans, no respect that there was an American congressperson in that bus, and laughing when our translator told them that there are Americans there and the American embassy is concerned. It is the arrogance of power, of a power that has had no accountability, total impunity, and has created a toxic culture of oppression.
Okay. And again, this is supposed to make me hate Israel. The fact that they saw Democrat Ro Khanna and just started laughing at the sight of him snooping around in the West Bank, trying to look with his magnifying glass for evidence of genocide. They just start uncontrollably bursting out. I mean, that's hilarious. What a bunch of patriots, right? But no, in all seriousness here, you talk about arrogance. What about the arrogance of yourself? Like, does he even hear what he's saying? Wow, how dare they detain Americans? Oh, well, so because you're an American, then you have the right to do whatever you want. Ro Khanna is actually reinforcing negative stereotypes about American people abroad, literally, because this fool, oh, I'm American, therefore I can just walk across one of the most sensitive border crossings on earth without authorization, without telling people why I'm there. Why would people stop and question me? Don't you know? Like, it would be as, and the Ro Khanna's excuse is, oh, but our tax dollars go to Israel, which we'll address in a second. But okay, our tax dollars also go to South Korea. Would it be, and our military actively defends South Korea, unlike Israel, right? Do I therefore, as an American, I have an American passport. Do you see it? I have the right to just show up to the DMZ and say, okay, let me see the whole thing. Let me even walk across. And they were like, stop, stop, stop. I'm going to say the arrogance of these South Koreans. How dare they? Don't they know I'm an American? Therefore, they're not allowed to enforce their extremely dangerous border. Okay, security just has to go out the window. How ridiculous, okay? As Max points out here, completely true. Khanna traveled to a foreign country, wandered into a military-protected national security zone, didn't coordinate with the host country, and is now mad that they dared to question what the heck he was doing. Yeah, exactly. So in many ways, either Khanna's really stupid, or again, this was an entire stunt designed to make this headline, IDF detains American congressman, and we don't actually ask what he was doing there. And by the way, how telling it is that he went to the West Bank of all places. And let's address that, because you see him doing this now, right? He's trying to argue that he's the real America first. And we often see sometimes Palestine activists will try to use that sort of like right-wing coded phraseology to say, well, we're American first. We don't want our tax dollars going to fund Israel, or we don't want our tax dollars going to fund a quote unquote genocide and all of these things. But as I've made the case before, yes, there is such a thing as Israel first. Okay, I think sometimes it's overplayed, but sure, there are like certain people in the Republican Party who are super hardcore Zionists, whatever, neocon, those things. Sure. But I think there's also such a thing as Palestine first. And you see that maybe even more so nowadays in the United States from the Third World Coalition, right? They don't care about this country. They care way more about, again, their third world causes. And here's a prime example. So you have Ro Khanna saying, how about being on Team America? He claims he's Team America here on his stupid trip to the West Bank. He was doing it on behalf of America. Well, here's the thing, guys. Again, I find it very illuminating that he went to the West Bank of all places. Because, of course, people will try to say that, how dare you say this is a foreign issue that doesn't affect America? Are you stupid or something? Don't you know our tax dollars go to Israel to help with their military? A lot of the wars that go on in the Middle East that we're involved in, Israel also is having some hand in and stuff like that. Okay, that's all true. That's all true. Fair enough. But notice how, again, he's visiting the West Bank. The West Bank, just to clarify, is basically the one Israel-Palestine border that America has very little to do with, right? It's like, it's not really our issue. It would be one thing, for example, to go to the border of Lebanon, because obviously that's something that Trump's trying to negotiate with Israel, and America has more of an interest in that with what's going on there between Hezbollah, Iran, Israel, that whole triangle. Okay. Is he going to the border of Lebanon and seeing if Israel is upholding America's interest and following the deal there? No. Is he even going to Gaza, for example, to see if Israel is abiding by the American peace deal? No. He's going to the one part of Israel/Palestine that America has nothing to do with, which is, again, what is my entire point? He's not freaking Team America. This is actually what we call Palestine first, where he's just going to the West Bank because he cares more about his stupid third world foreign sand cause than he does any issue here that actually involves America. And how fitting, of all the places you could go in Israel or the Middle East where you might try to argue an American interest, he goes to the one place where you literally just can't, because the West Bank does not matter to us. It is not literally our business at all, but he's just there to go and say, oh, look at what Israeli settlers are doing to the third worlders, or look at the poor brown people, they're being genocided. That's what we call Palestine first. And this is actually a very relevant conversation, because going back to what I previously said, that if there is such a thing as Israel first, there's also such a thing as Palestine first, which I think people like Ro Khanna, Cenk Uygur, and many others genuinely do represent. Then how do we define what the America first position actually is? And I bring that up because you're probably familiar with, if you pay attention to online politics, but Israel skepticism is something that is also growing on the right wing in the past several years. And there are some conversations that I think are fair, such as, for example, the foreign aid, or does their lobby have too much power in our politics, or certain foreign policy decisions we've made in the past, right? Things like that. But I also noticed this trend. Thomas Massie, prime example, by the way, he's Ro Khanna's literally best friend in Congress. You know what he's about to say about this, where you have a lot of right-wingers just basically becoming what I would call quote-unquote right-wing Palestine activists, which is kind of an oxymoron. But let's actually explain this issue, right? Like the three camps of Israel first, Palestine first, and America first. Because here's what's important to understand. The historic America First criticism of, let's say, the neocons, the Zionists, whatever you want to call them, right? This is saying, for example, back in the 2000s, what was Pat Buchanan's criticism of people like, say, George Bush or Bill Kristol? Back then was not so much this idea that, oh, Israel is an apartheid state, or Israel's committing a freaking genocide, because apparently when like third worlders start a war they can't win and then end up losing the war, that means it's a genocide. Israel's a settler colonial state, apartheid, things like this. Well, you notice, and by the way, you notice nowadays, there's some people on the right wing just taking that type of criticism and adopting that type of language. And the important thing to note there is that that's like straight up leftist phraseology, right? Are you kidding me? Seriously, right wingers are talking about settler colonial apartheid state and blah, blah, blah. What are we doing here? And it's important to point out too, historically, where does Palestine activism come from? Dating back to the 1950s. It's literally a thing started by Western communists, right? That's historically a Marxist cause, right? The whole, again, Israel means colonialism, imperialism, that type of stuff. So it's not exactly, this is all to say, that's not exactly like a right-wing position to have, okay? What, however, was historically a right-wing criticism of maybe certain people who are very pro-Israel is not to say that, again, Israel is like a far-right fascist state or something. Like, what are you talking about? But rather, and this is important to define, is that a lot of the, let's say, Israel first neocons had a hypocritical view, which is to say a double standard between Israel and America, which is to say, for example, right, when it comes to immigration, Israel, as you know, very strict about their borders, very strong on national sovereignty and identity. If you're not of Jewish heritage, it is very difficult to gain citizenship to Israel. You know, that's not something that's just being handed out on a regular basis. Very strong of who they are. But the historic criticism of Israel first has been that a lot of times those people do not keep the same standard for America. So you understand what I'm saying, right? It's not to say that like, oh, Israel is bad because they're racist. Again, are we leftists or not, or something here, right? No, it's rather to say, hey, the way Israel approaches immigration, if you support that, if you'll go and defend that, why don't you defend the same in America? And for example, a prime example here would be, let's say, the ADL, right? ADL historically, like pro-Israel organization, they talk a lot about combating anti-Semitism and all those things, okay? So you look at an organization like that, historically, a lot of people that the ADL has tried to cancel throughout the decades have been critics of immigration, right? So they basically, the ADL goes out and says, as a pro-Israel organization who defends Israel, et cetera, but if you support immigration restriction in America, or like national heritage or sovereignty being defended in America, that makes you a bigot, an anti-Semite, racist, whatever, right? So that's actually the double standard here. That, I would argue, is like the real America First position, is to say, we're not against Israel's immigration policy. We appreciate the way they're treating subversive foreign leftists who are showing up to their country to cause problems, but we don't believe there should be a double standard, right? We believe that if you're going to support it over there, you should support it over here too. For example, the ADL does not do that. For example, of the GOP, as you may remember, pre-Trump, historically had a very liberal stance on immigration, while they would get on Fox News and say, oh, well, Israel is not an apartheid state. They're right to defend their sovereignty. You know, the Jewish people, they need to be able to do that, etc. But the same doesn't apply to America. So my whole stance is not that, like, I hate Israel, I have anything against Israel. It's literally just that my frustration historically throughout the years with some of these people has, again, just been that double standard. But it's not to say, right? It's not to say, oh, we're so upset because some stupid foreign leftist showed up to Israel, breached security perimeters, caused a bunch of problems, and Israel said basically they weren't going to tolerate that. Like, no, actually, that's based. Like, actually, that is exactly what that country should be doing, right? But that's the thing. If you're a leftist, that's exactly what you would say. If you're a leftist, oh, Israel's an apartheid state, stupid subversive third worlders should have the right to go and go to that country and protest and tear it down, you know, because that's the same thing they do to America, right? And we should open the border between the West Bank and Israel and Gaza and Israel. And hey, you know, let in the third worlders. Nothing's gonna go wrong. Just like in Europe, how nothing goes wrong and a bunch of violence doesn't ensue, right? That's what leftists do. But what's important to understand here and notice is that leftists do often make the same arguments about Israel that they do Europe and America, right? Israel, as I said, they believe is like this colonial invention. It's a settler apartheid state. It's fascist, all these things committing a genocide. Same stuff they say about America, same stuff they say about Europe. And so, you know, it's not a cause that any right-winger should be getting behind, even if they are skeptical of Israel or something like that. Like, understand what this is principally actually an anti-Western cause. In the same way they want to tear down the border between the West Bank and Israel proper is the same way they want to tear down the border between Mexico and the United States. It's the same way that they want to flood the Gazans, not just to Israel, but also to Europe and places within the West, okay? So that's what's important to note, is that leftists basically have the same stance on Israel as they do Western countries. So what I'm arguing is that right-wingers should have the same stance basically on Israel as they do towards Western countries, which is, yes, if Israel says protect the borders, don't listen to stupid subversive foreign leftists, do not let these people in. Likewise, so should Western countries, so should Europe, so should America say, hey, we're going to be strong about who we are. We're going to defend our borders strictly. Don't let them in. And by the way, don't let stupid foreign agents come around to mess with our country either and try to convince or subvert our national interests, right? That's the way I feel about it. But yeah, long story short, Ro Khanna here made an absolute fool out of himself, and we very much thank the IDF for giving him a bad day. Anyways, that said, let me know your thoughts. Be sure to leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel if you were new, and until next time, God bless and peace.